For 2 months, I announced to everybody that I'm not going to take any sessions, I'm not going to do any coaching, and I'll just share on Instagram whatever thoughts come up and nothing related to my business. And I dropped everything.
I think that a lot of people are like, I don't really want to be here because of all the drama and the chaos and the violence in the world right now. And I get that too. But when we shut that out, we're also shutting out the hope and the joy and the clarity.
My parents' house has been always heavily haunted, always, spirits coming and going, and a few of them are long-term residents of that place. So I have always been hearing them, around me, walking around me, talking around me. Welcome everyone to the Ineffable Mystic, and today's Ineffable Mystic is Siris Raquel Rivas-Verdejo, the owner of Empowering Light Language LLC. She works with busy individuals and families to improve their communication and self-care, facilitated by a greater connection with their bodies and powered by a greater awareness of how their language impacts their lives. And she is also a life coach, family child coach, speech language pathologist, learning behavioral specialist, feeding therapist, and therapeutic energy worker. She infuses her energetic techniques, cutting edge psychology, and results driven, empowering tools and strategies into her work. And after more than 17 years of experience, she has developed a poignant, dynamic, and unique approach that honors the little girl she was, who always knew more was possible for those who are different and a gift to the world. She is also the host of Choosing a Different Future podcast and lives in Charlotte, North Carolina. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, wow. More?
Yeah, more in your words.
Gosh, I feel very honored to have contributed to so many individuals and families over now it's about to be 18 years in August.
Mhm.
And I feel like I say that professionally, but I've probably been doing this since I was like 2 years old when my sister was born. This is what I was born for. This is what I chose this body and these particular family and pair of parents to do. There was really no way that I wasn't going to be doing this. It's really interesting, like how all the different breadcrumbs led to here, and yet there's still more doors opening and there's still more possibilities to explore. I love working with kids. I love working with families. I love working with individuals who they would still like to address and heal and speak with their inner child. A lot of the adults that I work with, they're when they're working on their communication, when they're working on their sense of self-worth and how they care for themselves, they discover that a lot of this was because they didn't have the best models or a model at all for how to do this type of thing, how to speak to bodies and communicate with energy and really partner with all of these different aspects that are at our disposal that we didn't get taught or talked about in school. That's one of the things I love about partnering with schools. For those that are open to it, I would like more and more schools to have these components in their curriculum. Because, man, how would our lives have been completely different if they actually talked about this in preschool and kindergarten and first grade instead of, oh, we kind of stumble upon it later on in life?
Yeah, so amazing that you're actually working with kids, like in schools. And I have always told everyone that I really want this knowledge to be taught in schools. Like, that's the ultimate goal, to have this begin in our childhood, because I went to medical school and still didn't learn a thing about healing, self-healing, or, energy healing that has such a great impact on our lives. And I think it's a life skill that everyone should have. And it's great that you are already working with schools.
Yeah, yeah. And I'd love to do that more. We'll see. That's one of the things that I'm asking of myself and of the universe, of my business as it continues to evolve. Like, what would that look like exactly? And I already had some plans of how to do it. And then with, 2020 onward, things have changed so much that I'm reassessing what would be the best format or way of doing it. It keeps shifting with other life circumstances and evolutions, but I'd really love to have like a program in place where school districts and schools can actually implement it and have a way of talking about it. But that takes that being something of value.
Mm.
That takes, the teachers and the administration getting some training a little bit. Those that are more perceptive and already tapped into energy, I think it'd make it a little bit easier for them. And then maybe they can be the leaders and ambassadors of this. And I also get, because both my parents were educators in the public schools for most of their lives. My mom was for over 35 years, was a bilingual educator. My dad taught in the schools and also was a coach of different sports, and they're overwhelmed. Teachers are overwhelmed, administrators are overwhelmed, and so I would like this to be really, really simple. I'd
Mm.
like it to be something where they feel like they could do it like breathing, where
Yeah.
it's not this additional task, where it literally is they can do it with all their students. It's not this separate thing. It's really embedded in all the different tasks that they're doing, this level of presence and connection with their bodies, these
Mm.
questions that they could ask so that the kids integrate that and then they walk around having that empowering them.
Yeah, and recently I've seen on TikTok and other social media this thing going viral that teachers are quitting because they are just so overwhelmed with what's happening with kids in the schools, and because of the training that the social media is providing for everybody to shorten their attention spans, that translates to other areas in life as not having the patience and not being able to sit with themselves for even a single minute, and that translates to so many other things like anxiety and other problems that happen, right? So it's really important for teachers and then also the children to learn these skills and incorporate these skills into their lives.
And I think that right there is one of the misconceptions I think that are out there. I
Mhm.
think that if unless you have a teacher that's a family member that or somebody that's your partner, you don't really see all the different demands that are a part of their job. For most teachers, even the ones that are working with more challenging students, like emotionally behaviorally challenged students, those that have a lot of medical needs, the kids are why they stay as long as they do. It's a
Mm.
lot of it, it's the paperwork, it's them changing the curriculum again, so they have to learn a whole new one when they finally got a couple years working with a certain type of way of teaching math or way of teaching literacy, and then them not having enough time for planning, them not having enough time to grade, and they have like parents or other community members really not getting all of those moving pieces and having a lot of demands, sometimes rightfully so, many times rightfully so. And so it's just a lot of different things that are stressing them where they don't really get enough breathing room to just teach. And
Yeah.
then on top of that, they're constantly having to test. At least in the United States, they're testing, testing, testing all the time. And so they don't get to really instill the joy of learning like they used to. When I was in school, many years ago at this point, and I was in school, in elementary school and in middle school and high school, the teachers they definitely still had demands then, but they weren't having to constantly test to the degree that they are now. And then
Mhm.
if you're a bilingual teacher on top of that, depending on the type of bilingual program that you're in, you're testing in both languages. So it's even more testing and it's even more grading and scoring of those tests. So I think that out of if you ask most teachers, the students and their attention or not attention, yes, it's increasing, it's a factor, but it's probably like fifth, sixth, seventh down in the list to the real reasons why they leave. Like if they were properly supported and they had the space and they didn't have as many students without assistance, like 30 kids without an assistant in a kindergarten classroom is unacceptable.
Yeah.
Like, how is that going to happen? And even with an assistant, that's really, really challenging.
Mhm.
Um, so those are, I think, some of the things that are playing out right now that makes them very dysregulated. And then the kids pick up on it, they get dysregulated, and it kind of bounces back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah, I wonder why we don't have more assistants in teaching.
There's not enough staff, especially with all these people leaving. There wasn't enough before, and there's even less now. And then the pay,
Yeah.
is it actually pay that warrants all the things that they're doing. A lot of teachers are moving into private tutoring or just changing jobs completely, consulting, things like that, because given all that they do, teachers are not getting paid enough. Like there's this beautiful article, and there's a talk that Bernie Sanders gave in front of Congress, I believe it was, around paying teachers at least $60,000. And you'd think that that would be a given. Like a lot of people like were surprised when they heard his speech that they weren't already getting that. It's like, no, a lot of teachers start with $24,000 a year. And
Wow.
they're being asked to do all of these things. That's not a living wage
No.
for most places in the United States. And even 60,000 in some places is not a living wage, right? So that just getting them to at least they can contribute if they have a two income household. Okay, that might be more doable, but you're asking them to do all these things to impact the future
Yeah.
through these children, through these families, and then you're not going to pay them accordingly. Why would anyone stay? Even the most giving, caring, generous of a person, unless they're a masochist or a total martyr at this point. I think what a lot of teachers have realized after 2020 onward is that it doesn't do the kids any good for them to be killing themselves like that. They're modeling this level of sacrifice that isn't great for the kids to see as a model either. We'd like for people to actually care for themselves as they're caring for other people. At least I would.
Yeah, and I feel that investing in our children is should be very high on the agenda for the government, and more should be invested in schools and teachers and assistants and resources, and technology, so that we can raise better children for the better future, because they are the future. I mean, it's just common sense, but it doesn't seem to be clicking in for some people, I guess. So
Yeah.
out of all of your modalities, what would you say is your favorite one or your biggest specialty?
I couldn't pick just one. That's anyone who knows me knows that I'm not good at picking any one thing. One of my coaching programs is literally called Choosing It All Your Way because it was speaking to everywhere that I was told that I should just pick just one. But I can say I can narrow it down to maybe two or three. The ones that I probably use the most on a regular basis is the living and dying body process, access consciousness tools, and whew, some type of mix between, gosh, probably shamanism, I think. Yeah, that's the one that's kind of leaning in the most right now. There's this connection to the earth with all of them that I think is really important. I think that that was part of a lot of my struggles in my youth. And also, I feel like if people did connect to the earth more, the world would be a lot different.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that we connect with our bodies and other bodies would be just way more expansive and joyful. Certainly would create more ease. So those are probably the three that speak to me the most and that I lean on most regularly for myself personally, and then also to gift to others.
Yeah, other than the last one, I don't think I know much about the rest of them. So you will have to explain them what they really are, and also for our audience. And so before we go there, what do clients come to you with? Like when they approach you, what are the problems they come to you with? And do they already know that I need this specialty, or do you talk to them and then direct them to a particular one?
Um, I think that most people have like an inkling at least of where they would like to have more clarity and ease. Like that's one of the first questions I ask on a consultation is, in what would you like to have more clarity and ease with?
Mm-hmm.
And that ongoing conversation from there usually reveals some other things. They're like, oh, I hadn't thought of this. I hadn't thought of this. But it's usually, they usually have at least one or two that they're like, I'd like support with my child. A lot of people come to me because they'd like to have someone that doesn't judge their child, that recognizes them as a gift, even though they connect, communicate, or create differently than
Mm-hmm.
the people around them. Maybe faster, maybe a lot of times it's faster. It's like they're really gifted and yet they're not really able to leverage their gifts in a way that's effective. It looks a little bit clunky. right? Be it because they have sensory issues or they have attentional difficulties, some learning challenges, they'll come to me for that. And then a lot of times the adults will then realize, oh, this brings up stuff in me and in my childhood, in my history, and I'd like to address that. When it's individuals that don't have kids, a lot of times they come to me because they don't really have a sense of joy. They feel like they are taking care of everybody else and they're not really including themselves and their care in the equation of their life. So those are probably the two biggest things. And then how that can impact their relationships, be it their romantic relationships or professional relationships. That is often those two things. Their overall well-being is
Mhm.
there. And then sometimes because they've seen a video or a talk, they already would like to try a certain technique or receive a certain type of energy work. Sometimes they're like, I know you have all of these that you do. Which one would you recommend? And then what I do at that point is I actually ask their body.
Mhm.
I ask their body which is the one that would create the most with ease. So it's not this upheaval for them. So it could be really gentle and relaxing. And that also will give them more clarity in those areas that they're looking to have more clarity in.
Mhm. Yeah, that sounds really wonderful that you're able to support people at the stage they are. So it's not like a great radical big shift that completely uproots their life, but it's like gentle and it takes them through the stages with support. So that's really great.
Comes
Yeah.
from like being a special education teacher because you have to meet whatever student is in front of you wherever they are and then build them up and add slowly at the whatever pace they can receive it in and acclimate that. You add more and more tools and strategies until they become independent in that skill. And that's what I do with all of my clients. My target is for them to not need me. I, unlike other, maybe therapists where they would like to see you for years and years, like I'd like to have a relationship with them for
Mhm.
as long as they'd like a relationship. And I'm fortunate that people still send me photos and we still stay in touch. But the idea is for you not to need me, for you to be so in tune with your body and using these tools that you're just rocking it. You're just applying it in all these different avenues.
Yeah. So, could you explain top three modalities about how they work and what they really are?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have a pretty different take. For shamanism, I work with a bit of a fantastical shamanism, which doesn't have the same perspective on like protecting yourself. You're still being aware of the seen and unseen energies, the things that everybody seems to see and notice, and the things that people aren't really talking about and acknowledging. And there's great connection with the earth and animals and nature overall so that you can move things out of your body and out of your mindset that is stuck or heavy, and plant some seeds for some future successes. And then with access consciousness, I learned about access consciousness back in 2014, and at one point was a certified facilitator of access consciousness, which means like you could facilitate some of the more advanced classes, multi-day classes. It is a system of tools that has about like 8,000 tools within it.
Mm.
So to be a certified facilitator, it's a lot of training, it's a lot of classes, and I still use all those tools every single day. I still practice a lot of the tools within there. As my business was evolving, um, right before, like I think it was 2019, I chose not to be a certified facilitator anymore because my business was changing in a way that it wasn't sustainable for me to be a certified facilitator and still do business the way I wanted to do business, including working with a lot of families and children. And but I really love everything that I've learned from them. And so they're in about 170 to 180 countries around the world. If you go to accessconsciousness.com, you can find classes and things about them, probably near you. And then the living and dying body process, after playing around with all of these energies over, gosh, since 2006 or so. I've played with theta healing and shamanism, like I mentioned, access consciousness, tantra, Reiki. Reiki was the first technique that I learned that I really am so grateful because it eradicated the pain, the chronic pain that I was in. Like it was it was life-changing. It
Mhm.
really did put me on the path to do what I'm doing now. I wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for Reiki. So immensely grateful for that. And all the different types of Reiki I've learned about. After playing with all of those modalities, I was giving different sessions to clients, and this new energy started to show up. And I was like, well, this is a new personality. This is like a new character here. What's going on? It doesn't feel like this one or this one or this one. And so I started asking questions with my body and with the earth and with that person's body, and started talking to it like it was a person, like this energy that was going on. I was like, what are you? And what would you like to create? And what's going on? And that's how the living and dying body process showed up. So with that one, it's all about you being aware of where you're picking up on other people's thoughts on living and dying, where people are choosing to kill possibilities or their bodies, including their futures. And you start to unlock it from your body to give you more energy, and also for you to have more clarity on what your unique gifts are with this. And a lot of people don't look at living and dying like I do. So they confuse it with life and death, which is different. Living is what you add to create more. It's very different.
Yeah.
And then dying, and this is the one that people avoid. They're like, why would I want to know about dying? It's like, well, actually, this is really essential, because dying is what you let go of to create more. So if you're not willing to let go of the judgment, the pain, the limitation, the heaviness, the things that are fearful or doubtful in your life, then you can't, you could be adding, but it's like there's not enough room. It's almost like it doesn't really seem effective. You get to be really messy with it and not as graceful with it. There's less elegance when you're not willing to also have the dying as well. Like the things that where you have to let go of those patterns to create more, those limiting patterns. So that's what I teach people to do. That's one of the things that I love to give sessions for as well. But even though I was the creator of the living and dying body process, if someone's body says no to receiving it in that day, I don't give it to them, because it's about what's going to work for that person and their body.
Yeah, this is so interesting and so relatable as well. Uh, about shamanism, I am so connected to nature. I always have to have nature around me, and whenever I'm in a building or somewhere where there is no nature around me, no garden, no grass, then I feel so restricted, so constricted, and I have to find a park or somewhere. I have to go there, and fortunately, there's a park behind my house, so it's every single day I make it a point to go outside and sit in the grass, and I talk to the birds around me, I talk to the trees, I hug the trees, I talk to the flowers on the ground. Like it's so conversational for me. And sometimes I receive such powerful downloads just sitting there. So I totally relate to that. And recently I have started using that communication for manifesting some of my soul desires. And just recently, just yesterday, in fact, I received an email for a big manifestation that I was working on from so many years. And only last week, I did a so-called, you can say, it was like a ritual of communication that I did with the spirits of the land. And I specifically told them that, this is what I want as an experience. And just yesterday, I got the email for it. So it was so powerful that it showed results in just
I love
1 week. So I totally relate to that. And I didn't know it's called shamanism or anything of that sort. And then I also relate to the living and dying body process. And again, you are the one that created the process, right?
Yeah, I mean, created it, received it.
Mm.
I really consider it like not quite channeling. It feels very collaborative.
Yeah.
Like it feels like it started to show up the tendrils of it, and then we just had a conversation, and it's like, okay, here you are, and let's keep it going. And so even when I'm creating classes, I don't really teach the classes very often. I used to try to do it like monthly or every 2 months, and it didn't really work, because my priority is very much to my clients more than anything, and they take quite a bit of my time. But I do now include, when people work with me through coaching, that they can get the class just included in their coaching, because after a couple of years I realized that those who took the class and when they were doing the coaching, they accelerated their progress. It just made things so much more enhanced. So I just embedded it as part of the program now. So it's like, okay, I already have guaranteed people that'll come to the class, which is nice. And then people who aren't in the coaching or who know me through other aspects can come as well. But I love, love, love what you said about your conversations with nature. And it's to the point for me that I'll often like be taking notes and recording ideas while I'm hiking with my dog
Yeah.
through the forest and my like little, like they have a lot of greenways and hiking trails by me. This is part of why I moved here to North Carolina, because there's just so much nature. They have mountains and waterfalls and hiking trails. The only thing that I love that they don't have is they don't have beaches near me. They have it in North Carolina, but it's like more in the coastline and I'm more inland. And I'm wondering for you, like what are some of the ideas that you get for yourself when it comes to personal versus professional? Like, does it show up differently if it's personal versus professional, or is it about the same?
So I feel that my professional ideas come from my personal transformation. So, like my whole life, whatever transformations that I had personally, I have incorporated that into my coaching business or in my courses as well. So I was talking about the living and dying body process, as you said. So that came to me last year in a very big way. So last year, after I tried a lot of different things with my business, I was still not getting the results that I was looking for. And in terms of satisfaction, so I was not satisfied with it. And I was feeling like something big is missing. And I didn't realize that my energy was in all these different things that I was doing. And my
Mhm.
energy was getting, spread around. And also, like, there was a lack of self-belief. So what I really needed to do was just drop it all at once and do nothing and be a nobody. So that's what I did. For 2 months, I announced to everybody that I'm not going to take any sessions and not going to do any coaching. And I'll just share on Instagram whatever thoughts come up and nothing related to my business. And I dropped everything. And I went and got a part-time job as a landscaper with one of my friends. So I the whole day I would just be,
Nature component
yeah,
there.
nature. So the whole day I was not doing anything except working with plants, working with seeds, and you know, doing all the things that you need to do in the garden and learning about plants. So I learned so much about seeds and when to plant them, how to plant them, fertilizers, all of those things, right? So because of that ego death, you can say, I completely shed my ego there. I was a nobody for 2 months. It completely shifted my whole reality. Right? So I let go of everything that I was carrying, and then I slowly picked up new things, and then new opportunities started coming my way. A teacher came my way who allowed me to express my other talents and gain more self confidence and know that I was this very natural entrepreneur. I had all these skills and within me that weren't explored before, and he allowed me to open all of that up and bloom into this again a new person. So I completely credit my transformation to that ego death. So I completely relate to the living and dying body process, and you have given it a name now. I didn't have a name for it, you know.
It was asked to be called that from the
Yeah.
beginning. So, and
Hmm.
it was interesting because there were many times, especially given the initial resistance, there was, when it really came out into the public, it was 2019. And so what were we aware of, right? Like, and it was so amazing I was giving all these different sample sessions, like hundreds
Mm.
during 2020. We really started doing a lot of sample sessions around Suicide Awareness Month and things like that. But I now recognize that there were people whose lives were saved just from like a 20-minute sample session, that they were really feeling like they didn't have a purpose. They were very isolated. They didn't know when this would ever end, and nobody really knew, right?
Yeah.
And we're not really sure if it's still not really ending. Like the repercussions of that, the rippling out of it is still permeating our world. But one of the things that I'm so grateful for about it is that I still stuck to it being called that, because as much as people didn't want to talk about dying when everybody was dying and didn't want to really look at this in a different way, I knew in the long run, I was playing the long game. I still am. I'd like for people to be able to have these conversations about life and death, which are the more heavy, solid things, and living and dying and creation and destruction, and it be something that is just as easy to talk about as like getting your nails done,
Yeah.
or the TV show that you watched last night with your family. Like, what it's why is this so taboo? I think that's the very reason why things are the way they are, is because we haven't been having those conversations. So as much as I considered it, and I really appreciate my team's perspective of like, people are really wigged out by you calling it, the people that were open to it, those first initial pioneers that were practicing and taking the class, I'm so grateful for them, because they really showed me to lean into those people, to call for them to show up, and they've been coming up more and more and more. I think that's indicative of what people are finally willing to receive and perceive, and I'm asking for more of that. Like, it's like, okay, let's do that. So it continues to want to be called that. Maybe at some point it'll be different. The class is called the Awakening class, because it used to be called Awakening Your Capacities with Living and Dying, and I just
Mhm.
shorten it to the Awakening class. But in that, you're still learning about the living entire body process. And so, but that's what it does. It awakens you.
Yeah.
And who wouldn't want that? Like, who wouldn't want to feel more alert and present with their sense of joy and hope? I think that a lot of people are like, I don't really want to be here because of all the drama and the chaos and the violence in the world right now. And I get that too. But when we shut that out, we're also shutting out the hope and the joy and the clarity. And I think it makes it all the more challenging.
Yeah. And I feel there is just so much noise all around us, and it needs to be quietened at some point at least. And when we let go of certain things that we are holding on to as a part of our identity, we shed that, and then that noise goes away, and then we are able to tap into who we really are at the core, and then
Yeah.
that starts blooming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so tell us your story. Where were you before? Were you always interested in these sciences, or did something happen in your life that brought you from there to here? So tell us about that.
Yeah. I think that at a very young age, I was always aware of the unseen. I was certainly aware of entities and spirits, but I didn't know that that's what they were as a kid. I thought everyone was seeing the things and aware of those energies. And then only when I got into my like 30s, what did I realize? Oh, wow, no, that's exactly what I was doing with my uncles that are alcoholics. I was sifting through these entities that were around them to get to the light that was them. And I thought that that's what everyone did. I thought everyone could see when it was really somebody that you love there, or if it was something else in the way. And I think that that's something that I think that when we have these conversations, we start to discover about ourselves, the things that we knew as kids that we buried, or that we just haven't really recognized in the power of them. But I was born in Puerto Rico, to two bilingual educators, like I mentioned, and my siblings have special abilities. So my sister was born with spina bifida, and my brother was born with diaphragmatic hernia and a heart murmur. And so we were in the hospitals a lot. We were in receiving occupational therapy and physical therapy and speech therapy for both of them. So I'd been inundated with these possibilities from a very young age. And one of the things when you're in the hospitals a lot, you learn to perceive when people are in crisis and when they're stressed, when to give them space, when to entertain yourself, when to give them a hug, and do the verbal things, do the nonverbal things. That there's all this dance that is happening with these energies and with people's feelings and their thoughts about stuff, with their sense of hope or lack of hope, um and also with their projections and expectations. Like, that's one of the things that I'm super pleased that I learned, was the power of projections and expectations. And it still continues, for sure. I still have to catch myself on that. But when people were projecting all these things at my siblings, like, oh, your sister's not going to be able to walk ever, and then she learned to walk when she was 4. Oh, your brother is he might die. And my mom was like, nope. And my parents were like, nope. And the families came and visited from all over, to say hi to him, and because they were like, just in case he dies, we want to make sure we see him. And then he didn't, and he keeps thriving right now. Like he's, literally in a couple rooms away. We're working in cybersecurity, like it's just the lives that they've created beyond what was projected and expected of them is what I lean on when I work with people right now. It's like, okay, you're coming in with like this cloud, this mist of all this stuff that you've been told, and how much of that isn't true.
Mm.
And let's move that out of the way. Let's actually find you through all of that. What's really truly you? What's your light? And then what are the tools that we can add, the energies we can add that will help you shine your light even brighter, that will help you show up for yourself and for whoever else you want to show up with and for more effectively. So I did that, and then I went to fast forward because it's a lot. I went to college and studied speech language pathology, and I did a master's in speech language pathology and learning disability, so like a dual master's program. And I kept the energy work stuff over here, and I kept the speech and language academic kind of stuff over here until my families were like, hey, do you have anything else we could try? And for those that I got a yes to share it with, because the people that are more open to stuff and those that are not, I'm glad I asked the question. I'm glad I let them kick my butt into the next chapter of my business. And yeah, I'm very grateful to them. It gets me emotional because it's completely knocked me into a whole other track,
Mm.
and this is what happens. Like, people are asking of us to step up and do different things, and we resist and we dig in our heels and we get fearful. And I was scared that they were going to take my license away, that they were going to take the kids away from me, that I would be seen as crazy or lose my reputation as somebody that would get all these referrals and cases. And that was the absolute opposite of what happened. And so I'm that's kind of what led to all of that, because as soon as I started playing with those energies for my own health, I had a lot of chronic pain and chronic illness that started in my teens, and like 15, 16 years old. By the time I got to my 20s and I was graduating from my master's program, I was at a precipice. I was at a moment where I had to choose how I was going to live. And I knew I wanted to live, but my body was not really cooperating because I didn't know how to partner with it yet. I didn't. Again, not something that we were taught, right? And so I started working with a Reiki master, and I started working with naturopathic physicians, and it started to mix and mix and mix, because the families that I was working with were seeing these shifts and they were tapping into that, even if they didn't have words for it. And then they asked, and I started to lean into it and do what they were asking. And it was fun, and it was so much more easy than try to keep the walls up between these different worlds. I needed the worlds to collide and come together. And now it's just impossible for me to keep them apart. It's all together now. It's a big old awesome blender smoothie.
Yeah, more power to you that you prevailed, that you persevered in such a fear-based society. Everywhere people project their fears onto you, and especially when one is an energy worker by nature, when someone has that kind of a life path, it's all these challenges that we have to confront, and all this fear projected onto us that you can't be doing this. And of course the fears come from within us as well, that if I came out as a healer or energy worker, people are going to make fun of me, they're going to call me stupid. And that was the reason for the longest time I hid my business on LinkedIn. So I would only put my other professional credentials, and I never showed a sign that I'm any kind of energy worker on LinkedIn. And that did not get me anywhere. So only when I posted my business there, I started posting some of my Instagram posts on LinkedIn, that people started recognizing me, and then they started offering me roles, because then they recognized all the different talents that I had, the entrepreneurship skills that I had. and my authenticity and the courage. Before, I was hiding myself, so I wasn't able to access that, you know?
Yep. Yep. I really do. I do know. And there's a congruency, there's a resonance there that when it's not quite all clear, confused people don't choose. So they're like, there's something off. I'm gonna go to this other person. I'll come back to this maybe, or maybe not, but like there's something off here, and they don't choose it. But when you're really show up as much as you can, and there's no 100%, it's, we're constantly learning more of ourselves and stepping into what our powers are and our greatness. But as much as you can, they perceive that, people perceive that, and they're like, oh, okay, this is somebody that's functioning from integrity, this is someone that's doing business honestly, okay, I can mess with that, let's go.
Yeah, every one of us is tapped into the energy, but most people don't know it.
Hmm.
And yeah, they are coming from their fears and projections, but those people who do know it, they are the ones that, are navigating their life by tapping into this part of themselves. And it leads to wonderful results, right?
Yeah, and I love working with all the people as long as there's an openness and
Yeah,
there's a willingness to play with the different tools and an accountability to themselves of like, okay, I'd really like this to show up. And so let me use whatever way is going to show up, is going to have that show up. That would be great. I think that I'm brutally pragmatic. For me, part of me delving into all these different tools was I'm an avid learner, but I also am like, well, what if that doesn't work for somebody? I need something else.
yeah,
It's happened so many times where if I went in being like, oh, this is absolutely the technique I should approach this with, and I block out everything else, I'm really dishonoring that person. I'm really dishonoring what's possible. And so I love having an array of options. And stepping into that and being like, okay, does this match? Because they light up. They can say, oh, that's the one. Like when it
yeah.
really is the one that's supposed to be for that day, that moment. Woo, it's like, yes.
Yeah, it's been the same for me as well. I started with past life regression therapy, and that didn't help me as well on my own path for about 2 years. And only when I had my own spontaneous regression, I started working with clients. So it didn't help me as well before I could, take on any clients. And then when I started working with that, I felt there is something missing. And then Reiki came into my life. And that's when I learned Reiki. And then it opened another dimension. So it's just like allopathic medicine, one medicine cannot heal everything, right? So the doctor decides, consults the patient, then decides, okay, you need this, you need this, you need this. And unfortunately, there the patient doesn't have much choice to say yes or no. But
Yeah.
here in energy work, they can choose according to what lights them up,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I
So
love that you did past life regressions too. That's one of the modalities that I like to receive. I've checked in with myself to see if I ever want to be trained with it, and it's still a no, but I love, love, love learning about it and receiving those sessions. And I'm actually reading the second book from Dr. Michael Newton. Have you read his books on
yes,
the souls and destiny of the soul? So I'm reading Destiny of the Souls right now, and it's like you're getting a session when you're reading those case studies that he does. It's so yummy. I love those books.
yeah, I also love those books as well. I've devoured all of the Michael Newton and Dr. Brian Weiss books. So yeah.
Dr. Brian Weiss was the first person I read about many years ago, back probably in 2005 or before, that was like, oh, this is a thing. Oh, I love it.
Yeah, he has been the modern pioneer, and he is also the teacher of my teacher. So there
Oh,
is a connection there, and also the techniques ultimately that I use are passed down by his techniques that I'm using.
wow,
So
awesome.
yeah, and you also talked about your psychic and spiritual experiences when you were a child, and I totally relate to them as well because I used to see a lot of things. My clairvoyance was very active when I was a child, but then I closed it off because I saw that people did not accept it. They thought that it is some, ghost that is causing that. So they would take me to priests to get exorcised or whatever. And so I blocked it off. And then, but my clair audience was always active, and I could always hear the ghosts and that were around me. And incidentally, my parents' house has been always heavily haunted, always, spirits coming and going. And a few of them are long-term residents of that
Mm.
place. So I have always been hearing them, around me, walking around me, talking around me. And so I kept thinking that maybe I'm schizophrenic or something. But then when I grew up and I met these other people who were also having these experiences, and then I met my husband with whom I had a paranormal experience, and both of us were hearing it. So that's when I confirmed that okay, I'm not crazy, right?
And how wonderful is it to be able to share that
Yeah.
with your partner? Like, I'm so grateful to my partner that we can flow energy to each other. We can give each other energy work. When I'm talking about these different things, he reminds me of the questions I can ask to pull myself out of the funk. I can do the
Hmm.
same with him. Like, so, and sometimes we'll just be curled up watching a show and without even thinking, we're running things on each other. And it just creates this beautiful space. There's this
Yeah.
intimacy there that doesn't have to include penetrative sex, even though it's nice when you add it to the penetrative sex too. But like, it's just the type of relationship that I always desired, and it's and I'm beyond grateful. Like, it's so awesome because I can fully show up as myself. I don't have to like walk on eggshells or
Yeah, the same here.
different things. Like, here I am, all of the things, the grumpy part, the awesome part, the okay, cool, like whatever passive part, the aggressive, all of it. It's just all there. And he gets to do that too. And so it's really, really nice.
Yeah.
I hope for that for everybody to, even if you're not interested in a relationship, for your friendships to be like that, for
Mm.
your business collaborators to be like that.
Yeah, and we have been like a mirror to each other.
Mm.
And I thought that I was self-aware, but he is such a person who can just talk to you and get to know everything that you're going through. So his third eye is very active. He can
Yes.
just see right through you, and he calls on my BS all the time whenever I am
I
slacking, or whenever I'm not following my own teachings, or whenever I'm in the lack of integrity somewhere, he'll just call it out. And that is a great quality to have in your partner. Yeah.
yes. Well, and good for you that you're willing to receive that, because a lot of
Yeah.
people aren't open to that type of feedback. They want
Mhm.
someone that fits this certain spot in their picture of their life, and it's just a filler, and they don't really want the person to fully show up, and they don't want to necessarily be called out on their stuff. And so, like, I commend you for being willing to receive that and choose someone that holds you accountable, because that
Mhm.
shows that like you really want to be the best version of yourself, and you're picking somebody that helps you strive for that. That's awesome.
Yeah, even that was an exercise in itself. Initially I was resistant, but slowly I noticed that, he has these insights. And then I went on to study our human designs, and that's where I got to know, okay, I should always be listening to him because he has such a through and through vision. And ever since I started listening to him, it has been a huge change in my life, I would say. So yeah. And
Beautiful.
it's a great quality to recognize those gifts in other people as well. You can be blind to them or resistant to them as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what do you normally do when you are in a low zone of life? Let's say you are so stressed, you are stuck, and you can't seem to get anything in your intuition or your channel. So what do you do in those times?
I've gotten a lot of practice doing that. And especially in the last 2, 3 years, because we've had so many people pass in my family and in my circle, like of friends, exes that I was still in touch with, colleagues. I mean, you name it, every area of my life, there were people that were dying. And so the grieving process, and not really having a lot of time to process one before the next person and process that one before the next one, really required for me to be like, I need to figure out another schematic for to deal with this, because it was just so much. And I was still seeing clients and running my business and all this stuff. So um one of the big things that has been a huge help is to give myself permission to pause. like when you said about the, letting go of your ego, like I had to have a lot of conversations with my ego and streamline my business and let things go, like let groups that I was facilitating go, let certain projects go. That's when I was also changing the frequency of when I was facilitating classes. I narrowed down and really was a lot pickier about the clients that I would take on. And then I'd sit now and I do a lot more breath work and yoga. Like I've done yoga since I was 15. And so instead of waiting for when I could go to a class, I would do it in any corner of my house just to get it in. Even if it was 10, 15 minutes, that would do so much for me compared to waiting for like, oh, it had to be a full class or nothing. And I was like, no, that's where is this polarity coming from? It doesn't have to be this all or nothing. And so these little chunks and moments I would insert in really ramped up how much energy work I gave and received, because when you're giving energy work, you're receiving a session.
Yeah.
But also really making a bit of priority for me to receive sessions and not necessarily have given first or given earlier or something like that. And silence. Like I sit in quiet a lot more. Because of the business, I have an international business, so sometimes I would literally get up and I'd roll over and I'd be on my phone. And one of the things I learned from my EMDR, my brain spotting therapist, was to take 5 deep breaths before I even start my day, and it resets your vagus nerve. But then I would start doing it within each transition. I would do these 5 deep breaths, and that would help regulate me more and be clear on what is the thing out of all these awesome things in my treasure chest of tools, which is the one that was going to create the most that day. And so I got to really embody and practice the very thing I've been inviting people to do in my work. It's just at a whole other level, because it really was nonstop there for a while. And I finally have gotten where we've had about 6 months of nobody dying. And then we just had one of my aunts pass away a couple weeks ago. But before that one, it was 6 months. And I was like, oh my God. Oh, yes, finally. Like, because it was, I was asking for a 3 months break and it wasn't happening. We were having people pass away so often. So very, very grateful for that shift, and to have all these tools available that I can be like, okay, breathe. And what now? What's going to really create more breathing room, more space, more ease? Okay. And then what's the next thing? And just being really present. And one of the things that I'm grateful for with grief is that it does force you to prioritize. It does force you to trim the fat and be really present with your body if you actually want to get to the other side of the grief. I know some people, and I respect it if they choose it, want to distract themselves from the grief, want to, do something else, and they're not really as present with their bodies. But given what I know about bodies and the unseen and entities, I didn't want to invite entities and spirits to take over or to make choices for me while I wasn't present. And I knew it was so tempting. Oh my gosh, was it tempting to just go. But I'm glad that I chose to stay here. I'm glad I chose to still create. It just had to be different.
Yeah. And I'm sure you have so many things to say as well about all these different modalities that you're practicing and so many stories to tell. I wish we can do another episode as well and talk more about your work. So, what is the one take home message that you would like to give to our audience today that makes the most sense for you right now?
I love that question. I don't think I've quite been asked that question in that way before. So thank you for that. I think the thing that comes to mind right now is for people to start literally writing down what their gifts and capacities are. Like, what do you know about the earth? What do you know about connecting? What do you know about communicating, creating? Like, that's different than other people. Like really leaning into that difference and seeing what those ahas about yourself, that acknowledgement would create. But I think acknowledgement is such a beautiful tool, especially when it's done through curiosity and gratitude. And so I'd love to hear what your listeners and what your community realizes about themselves and recognizes about themselves, and then what they choose to do with that information.
Yeah, and I hope our audience realizes this and thinks about this question and writes it down in the comments about what they think their gifts are. I think one of my main gifts is writing. So when I write, I channel the best. And I also am a very good teacher. So when I learn something, I process that information and I put that information into very to the point, bullet points, easy to understand. And then I teach that information to anybody who's ready to learn. And they really appreciate how well I presented that information. So I'm very good in that way.
And we need more people that are willing to do that, that are willing to make things accessible and simple and palatable.
Accessible is the word.
Yeah, to people, because with the overwhelm that is going on with the noise, like you mentioned earlier, it's so easy to not add tools because you're like, I'm already just trying to tread water right now. Can I'm and not recognizing that that treading at some point is going to lead to drowning if you don't get a life preserver. And so that's part of what I love about learning and working with people like you, where it's something where it's like I'm adding on a life preserver. Like I might not feel like I need it yet, but I'd like to make sure that it's ready for when things go sideways, and it can so quickly. And I've definitely experienced that multiple times in my life. And one of the things that when you have these tools, you get to be your own lifeguard.
Yes, definitely, because life is always going to be up and down. It's the fact that do we have these tools to always um, take us through those things in a productive way, you know?
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
So that's all for today. Where can people find you if they want to work with you?
Oh gosh, you can check out my website, empoweringlightlanguage.com. You can look up Empowering Light Language and a bunch of stuff will come up, like including my YouTube channel, Instagram, Facebook, things like that. I'm on SoundCloud. The best way to schedule like a direct conversation is you can book it through my website or just email me at empoweringlightlanguage@gmail.com. And I am taking less clients right now, as I mentioned. So if you're interested, you feel free, even if it's just initially, and we can maybe put you on a wait list if by the time you hear this, because this is like forever out in the internet, depending on what my caseload is at that point. But even if it's just to inquire, like, or just to say, hey, I really enjoyed your chat or the whatever aha you got. Like if I don't get to see the comments below, I'd love a direct message, and I usually reply within like 48 hours.
That's wonderful. And I'll put all your links in the description as well. So thank you for being here today. So much wisdom was channeled, so many nuggets of wonderful, wonderful knowledge that came through. And I look forward to maybe talking again if you're willing to.
I would absolutely be willing to. This was lovely. Thank you so much, Rio.
Thank you so much as well. So we will see you next time
Okay.
and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.